So happy Valentine's Day. I am not a person who needs everything to be 100% comic book accurate, which the more I continue to consume superhero media might actually be a lie I convinced myself of. I might 100% be wrong on that one. I might need to be that person. But the one place I want them to try is the romances. It feels like most modern comic book adaptations don't want to adapt the romances from the comics, or they'll add a million obstacles in the way that weren't there before for no reason. Sometimes they'll just say fuck the comics and instead make their own character who will have a romantic relationship with another, which that's always fun. If you've been on my channel before, you know I will find a way to complain about any romance in any TV series, movies, books, comics. Why is this my sticking point? You know, it's not that hard most of the time. A lot of writers are bad at writing romance. But there's something especially annoying when writers just decide to forgo the entire comic book romance that their property is based on. Is every romance in the comics good or perfect? No, every once in a while you're going to get that one good couple, but most of the time it's a lot of trial and error. But because this is an adaptation, they could actually use the new media to try and fix out the cracks in the romance, even the more popular and well-known ones. That's the biggest advantage of adapting. But they don't do that. Instead, they just do a whole variety of other things. The MCU isn't the worst at skipping out on comic book romance, but it's not exactly a priority for them. And when they do adapt comic book romances, it can go pretty poorly. Like Steve and Sharon. I think Steve and Sharon are pretty wishy-washy in the comics also, but people have at least come up with better storylines for them. But for some reason, Sharon is actually pretty non-existent in most Captain America adaptations. Occasionally, they'll put in a stand-in for Sharon, or they'll switch up her name. The Captain America movie from the 90s did this. She's not Sharon Carter, but she's still Sharon. The MCU is the only Marvel adaptation to have Sharon Carter, and they do a pretty awful job of her romance with Cap. They have 2 scenes together in Winter Soldier, and then in Civil War, which is a garbage movie, they are randomly flirting at Peggy's funeral. It's very weird and a little uncomfortable. Honestly, it probably would have been better if they gotten rid of the romance in this version, especially with the emphasis on Peggy being his, one true love. Someone in the comments is gonna fight me on that. And instead, they should have adapted them into being friends. Sort of like what they did with Natasha and Clint. Speaking of Natasha, we're going to talk about her now. Black Widow in the comics has a lot of iconic love interests, the most well-known being Clint Barton. She also had a thing with Tony early on, and in the Marvel Ultimates universe, they were engaged before that comic became a whole thing. The best part of the Ultimates universe was Miles, and everything else is garbage. Except maybe President Captain America, but that's just funny. Then there's Matt Murdock, who she had a serious relationship with, and they were the first non-married couple to move in together in comics. And finally, there's Bucky Barnes, who she had a relationship with when she was in the Red Room, and then they later rekindled after they both got out. There is actually a moment referencing their relationship in the MCU.
Please recognize me.
That's never gonna get followed up on. Natasha is also Bucky's only major comic love interest, so with her dead, there's really not a lot of hope for any comic accurate loves for him. So you could just put him with Sam Wilson, all I'm saying. She's also got a few minor relationships that aren't as iconic, and as part of her origin story, she was married to the Red Guardian. And as MCU fans probably just pinged right there, they made her husband her foster father in that. Yeah, I'm questioning why that is. There's also a universe where she and Steve Rogers end up together and have a son. All of these love interests are in the MCU. Her 4 iconic love interests are there, as well as one from another adaptation. So the MCU has all these options for who to make Nat's love interest. And instead they pick Bruce Banner. Why did we let Joss Whedon ever decide things? There's a variety of reasons, even outside of comic accuracy, as to why this was a bad choice. Sorry to people who ship this, but this was bad writing. Bruce also has an iconic comic book love interest who got screwed over by the MCU. So there's that. I'm not going to talk about that one because I haven't seen Incredible Hulk. I've seen every other MCU movie except that one. Don't ask why. Probably because everyone's told me it's bad, and I have standards. But I could forgive comic book inaccuracy if they actually made sense. Bruce and Natasha do not. Like, it's so bad. It's just like, oh, I guess we're flirting. Here's the reasons why we shouldn't be together. Make out. The Hulk flies off into space. Who let us give Joss Whedon a romance or any female characters? Honestly, regardless of the writing, this could have been really great writing, but Mark and Scarlett just do not have the chemistry for this. They really should have picked love interests who they have chemistry with. Like, for example, Chris. That goes for both of them, but different Chris's. Honestly, I think pre-Age of Ultron, we might have all assumed that Steve Nat was going to be their end goal, but that didn't happen. Maybe it's just me. I don't know when I did a Winter Soldier rewatch and accidentally became a Steve Nat shipper. I'm not super into it, but I'm like, it would have made sense. Tony Stark's love interest with Pepper is not the love story the MCU wants you to think it is. Pepper actually marries Happy, and while the two did eventually get a divorce, they were reconciling their relationship when he died. Tony and Pepper do go out a few times, and after several decades in real life time, which is probably about a year in comic book time, they realize that they're better off as friends. Tony has a lot of comic book love interests, which is to be expected, and yet still not as many as Matt Murdock. I could go into Loki, but I'm not touching that. That's a conversation for not today. I'm not getting into that bullshit. So those are the MCU ones that are pretty bad in terms of comic book accuracy. X-Men now. I think anyone who's watched the X-Men movies and has also consumed any other form of X-Men media knows that the movies haven't exactly adapted a ton of their romances. But it's the romances that they do adapt that are significantly more confusing. Why are Rogue and Bobby a thing? Like, I get it, it's 2000. Bobby hasn't come out of the closet yet. But still, why? And they never adapt Rogue's most iconic romance between her and Gambit, which is one of the most iconic comic book romances of all time. They didn't even get Gambit in these movies till X-Men Origins, and that was a bad choice. I actually liked the actor who played Gambit. Gambit scenes were good, but, like, god damn it. They upped the love triangle between Scott, Jean, and Logan. Up to this point in the comics, it was pretty much played that Logan and Jean weren't going to be a thing, and he just had feelings for her, which she didn't requite. But because the movies are popular, and comics like promotional tie-in bullshit, they followed suit, which was a love triangle that was super annoying and really toxic for everyone involved. But at this point in the comics, they're kind of doing a subtext thing. It's kind of implied that they're doing a polyamory. I don't know if I want it to stay subtext or if I want them to, like, full on confirm that all three of them are sleeping together. I think it's the latter. If anything, the subtextual relationships are always the better ones in comics and the movies. Come on, we all know what's going on between Charles and Eric. There's also Emma and Scott, who are not a couple in the films. mostly because they're two separate generations of mutants. Emma's back in the 70s as a whole-ass adult, meanwhile, Scott is a baby. A part of me wants to touch the X-Men movie timelines. The other part of me is like, hey, that's more confusing than actual comic book timelines, because at least comic books are trying. Now there's more, but I am not going to list the 1 million comic book romances for the X-Men that did not get into the movies. I don't have time for that. To the DC half. Oh, Arrowverse, you're a thing I enjoy sometimes. And by sometimes, I mean the fun time travel show is really good and everything else is hit or miss. So let's start with Arrow. The show is pretty well known for throwing the Black Canary Green Arrow romance out the window at the end of season 1, which, I'm gonna be honest, I was very fine with. Oliver is a horrible person, and I don't know why Laurel wanted to get back together with a guy who cheated on her with her sister who died. But the Oliver/Felicity relationship was also hit or miss, and varied from season to season in terms of quality until they're just there in the last 2 or 3. Season 6 was so bad I forget most of it. At that point, I was just invested in whether or not Dinah and Black Siren would get together. Spoiler alert, they didn't. Then there's Roy and Thea. To explain why this annoys me, I have to explain their comic book counterparts. Roy is Oliver's adoptive son in the comics, and already you're squicked out. Great, I've done my job. I don't need to explain anymore. I've done it. Bye, guys. No, I gotta explain more. While Roy and Oliver do fight a lot in the comics, they're still family. Thea is based on Oliver's adoptive daughter, Mia Dearden, who is then also adapted into being his biological child in season 7 and 8. Connor Hawke got done so dirty in this show. Arrow, be more consistent with how you adapt things. Roy has a couple of major love interests in the comics, and while I get not adapting Donna Troy, probably because rights and they were originally going for a gritty superhero vigilante thing, Jade Nugent is right there. You could have easily done her. As a result of never having his relationship with Jade, his daughter Leanne doesn't exist. So Roy never gets to be a dad. Which in this show might have been a good thing. They 100% would have killed off Leanne. One day, I will talk about how Roy got entirely screwed over in this show. Dinah and either Laurel don't date any of the men that they did in the show in the comics. Should have just dated each other. There's no other comic-accurate romances in the show because every time that they do make a new character, they're so wildly different from their comic book counterpart that it doesn't even matter, or they'll just straight up make an OC. And then they'll retcon them to be comic-accurate anyways. That only worked once, guys. Come on. I'm not going to spend too long on The Flash, mostly because I quit the show after 4 seasons, and I have my limits. I'm not going to continue watching another 4 seasons of a show just for this video. Say that like I didn't watch all of Titans for this video. But I can at least talk about love interests from the first 4 seasons. Barry and Iris are a thing in the comics. They kept that accurate. Honestly, it doesn't really matter because Barry's dead for all the good Flash stuff anyways. Hi, I'm Riley, and I'm salty that DC keeps pushing Wally West to the side. So let's talk about Wally and how they had Barry date his wife for no reason because he needed to get over Iris for 5 fucking minutes. And he's not in the comics, so this wasn't even fucking... Yeah. Linda is Wally's wife in the comics, and they have 2 kids together. She is the most adapted love interest for Wally. So, you know who Wally's love interest is in the show? Jesse Quick. Jesse Quick. What is it with the Arrowverse and only having the sidekicks date other sidekicks who have similar power sets / skill sets? I do want to say that while I was looking up Wally's love interests, I discovered that the DC Wiki has a category called Women in Refrigerators, which is, fair because first Women in Refrigerator was in DC. It's literally the trope name codifier. There's a category for everything on the DC Wiki, though. Marvel Wiki, why don't you ever tell me about love interests or women in refrigerators? Cisco doesn't get with Cynthia in the comics, and I'm gonna be honest, Vibe is not really my expertise. I don't think he has very many major ones. Also, can we give her a new hero name? Please stop using the G slur for things in nerd media. You wouldn't have any random character use the N-word as their name. Don't even bother with Caitlin. She has so many love interests in this show and none of them are comic accurate. That includes her and Ronnie. They aren't married and she mostly just wants to be close to him because he's the only thing that can take away her powers momentarily. No one else matters because they're all OCs. Moving on! I already did a video on Supergirl's love interest problem, but I'm not going to skip it entirely. Aw, the tea fell on me. But that video was specifically about Kara's love interests and how they completely ignore her comic book accurate one, as well as including a rant on Imra/Monel. So if you want to go look at that, card, I don't know which way this is going to be. But I am going to discuss the other characters' romances now. We're going to start with the weirdest one, Jean and Magan. I'm not a fan of Young Justice. But the most popular version of their relationship is where they are literally uncle and niece. Ugh. I feel like that's all the explanation I need as to why this was a bad choice. Also, they never get together in the comics, so everyone else is an OC, so their love interests don't matter. Maggie Sawyer is Batwoman's love interest in the comics, but she's Alex's love interest in the Arrowverse, and that would be fine if they also didn't come out with a Batwoman TV show years later. So let's talk about Batwoman. So technically, Batwoman did do comic accurate love interest. It's just the one that no one cares about. Sophie is there for one issue and then doesn't matter after that. She exists to establish that Kate is gay and got kicked out of the military for that. So why they chose her to be the main love interest for Kate in the TV series is really confusing. Like, okay, you can't use Maggie, fine. Were they unable to get Renee Montoya because of the Birds of Prey movie? Was that it? But then they just bring in Renee later and she's Poison Ivy's ex. Which really just feels like them going up. Let's just put the iconic queer women together for no reason. Okay, whatever. Someone's gonna call me a lesphobe in the comments, even though I'm a literal lesbian. You see, I could talk about Legends of Tomorrow, but, most of the characters are OCs, and I really don't care about comic book accuracy when it's 80% OCs. So, Gotham was never as insane as I wanted it to be, but it came pretty close. So let's talk romance in this show. Feel like the most obvious one to talk about is Oswald and Ed's, which, wasn't actually really... We're not... So much salt over that. So in the comics, Penguin and Riddler, they occasionally team up, they're friends, but there's no romance there. Yet, you have a chance, DC. I think we can tell that this I'm okay with, because the build-up felt real, it felt natural, it felt like the conclusion to come to for the relationship, and then they fucked it up. Like, for 1.5 episodes, things were great, and then it went off the rails, and I know this is about comic book accuracy, but this is the one time where I'm like, yo, like, this is an example of them doing something good that's not necessarily comic book accurate. And it was actually unique. Oh my god, that shit was amazing. Actually, it was awful, but for a bit it was amazing. Every romance that Jim has in this show that isn't Barbara Keene is comically inaccurate. Sophia Falcone doesn't happen. Jim and Lee aren't a thing. Sarah Essen, his second wife in the comics, is not his second wife in the show. In fact, like, she dies at the start of the second season. All that romance got transferred onto Lee. I still question what that decision was. Because Lee is Alfred's love interest? It's like Young Justice mashing all the hero generations together, but for adult love interests. You know how I said I wasn't a fan of Young Justice? That's a lie. I fucking hate this show. But let's just focus on the comic book relationships that they ignore, and not the ones that come right the fuck out of nowhere. What is it with random love interests for Connor? Because of their generation mashing, we never get to see iconic romances happen in the show. Connor and Cassie didn't get together. Tim and Stephanie haven't become a thing. And even then, they'll do it so far in the background that no one can actually enjoy it. At least they did, Jade and Roy. Sort of. Leanne exists, that's all that matters. They skipped out on Tara and Beast Boy, but I'm okay with that because we've already got, like, the actual Teen Titans show to do that. Cassandra Cain and Connor never get together. Connor has a thing for girls named Cassandra, and Tim has a thing for blondes. This is how we work that out. Arrowette and Impulse don't get together, which, you know, I am very okay with because as a sissy lesbian truther, I don't need to see her with men at any point ever again. Also an Arrow Ace Bart truther, but the fact that all of Young Justice are so queer-coded in the comics, that's a discussion for another day. And then there's the ones in the show that come right the fuck out of nowhere. Have we not established that I'm a liar? Zatanna and Dick are not a thing. Zatanna is actually Bruce's love interest a majority of the time. Or John Constantine's, but he doesn't exist in the show, and if he is ever going to be in the show, he better be voiced by Matt Ryan, Greg. This is the only universe where Dick and Zatanna are a thing. Wally and Linda continue to not be adapted. Like, Wally and Artemis are fine. They're fine. But justice for Linda. McGonn and Connor are just going to make me mad, so I'm going to skip that. Calder is gay in the comics. He's attracted to multiple genders in the show, and I forget who it was, but one of the creators said that he was at least polysexual, which wording on that was weird. But since his comic book counterpart is gay, he and Tula aren't a thing, but it's okay. Calder was barely starting out as a character in the comics at that point, and then they did the whole new 52 retcon, and I'm gonna stop now. Perdita's not a character in the comics, so obviously her and Gar aren't a thing. What is it with recent adaptations and not having BB Ray be a thing? We all love it. We all watched the original Teen Titans show. They're cute. They're adorable. They argue like an old married couple. Riley, stop. There's some comic accurate ones. It's just that they're mostly in the background, and the only one that ever gets focused is Dick and Barbara. Which I'm okay with. OGP since I was 6. I ain't budging, people. Titans is a thing. Not a good thing, but a thing that I enjoy to hate watch. I will now rush through the entire plot and everything else about this show because if I don't, I will start talking, never ending, about the problems in this fucking show. Why is Dawn Dick's ex? This didn't need to be a thing. Is this for unnecessary drama? What are we on, the CW? It's there for no reason and ultimately has no effect on the show except for maybe the season 1 finale. And for some reason, its existence makes it feel like they're trying to downplay the Dick-Barbara relation. Fuck, something about it, just so much rubbing me the wrong way. Why were Garth and Donna a thing? Like, why? I would say that they couldn't fight to get Roy to be on this show, but you know what? Getting Roy on this show wouldn't be as bad as him on Arrow. Ugh. The thing about Titans is that the Titans are safe from the Arrowverse, and the Arrowverse characters are safe from Titans. I will say, I just ship Donna infinitely more with both Dawn and Corey, so, you know, I'll live. And then there's Connor and Blackfire. What is it with Connor and just never having a comic accurate love interest? I will take exactly one and no one's done it anyways. Every time he gets adapted, he's dating someone other than Cassie. Imagine if every single time that they adapted Batman, they didn't have Catwoman as his love interest. And I'm not saying like, oh, the next one they don't have Catwoman as his love interest. I'm saying every single one. That is what's going on with Connor. He never has Cassie as his love interest. And I'm not saying Connor and Cassie are amazing, but no one's even made an attempt. Connor and Blackfire haven't even interacted in the comics, so I'm questioning the logic on that one. So what's the point? Am I just mad that my favorite couples are never adapted? No. Most canon couples are pretty hit or miss, and 90% of my favorites are fanon. And all but 3 should stay that way. Also, my favorite gets adapted 90% of the time. There are advantages to being a Dick Bab shipper. But if any other medium cut out a romantic subplot, people would be pretty pissed, and would be even more pissed if they replaced it with an OC. And every time they don't adapt a romance, it feels like a message from the adapter that they didn't understand or read the comics, or just felt that they could do better. Oh, this decades-long romance? Pfft, we're not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to pair them with a random character. Or better yet, my OC. Or the best version, a character that is so inaccurate to their comic book counterpart that they might as well be my OC. That'll make the fans happy. It doesn't. And I'm not saying people owe things to the fans, but there's a reason they're fans of it. Thank you all for watching. Well, most of this video was me recapping a bunch of TV shows and saying, hey, this is inaccurate, this is not inaccurate. Anything where I just kind of start rambling has been my own opinion or personal experience. What's a comic romance you want to see in TV or movies? Which one got butchered? Let me know. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as well, and I will see you all next time. Hopefully not within 6 months like I did with my last video. Oh boy, that was a long one. Bye!